Okay, what's up friends? It's Matt here from Mennis Mixing, and I would like to show you my mix of this song. So it's a mix competition, and I guess the cool thing about it is that they want you to do some sort of social media post, and I thought I have the capacity to make videos, so I'll just do a little mix run through. So this song was super well recorded, and yeah, the only problem I had was probably that it was maybe a bit too punchy. All the toms were cleaned, which is great. A few samples, which were nice. Vocals really well done. Maybe a bit too dynamic, but just kind of layers of compression, sort that kind of thing out. So I guess I'll play you some bits and pieces and show you what I did.
Chances ain't good, but you're smiling. If I had your strength, maybe I'd see the lining. It takes all I have just to hang on. And I've lost count of these trips we've made, and I hate that the doctors all know my first name, but they're buying time.
Ooh, okay, so first interesting thing here is that these kicks were again a little bit too dynamic, so what I found worked best, rather than really heavily compressing them, was to just clip gain up these smaller hits here. Let me take the clip gain off again. Clip gaining up these secondary hits. Oh, I guess they're not secondary, they're the first hits, but they're kind of softer hits of the two, and so that they lock in with the bass a bit more kind of impactfully. So is there a quick way of turning clip gain off? There probably is. That's it. I'm pretty sure you can bypass the clip gain. Bypass. Right, super. So what we'll do is we'll play without.
These trips we've made, and I hate that the doctors all know my first name, but they're buying time for me with you, so I hang on. Well, I never dreamed that a car ride with you is something I'd give it all up just to do.
Just a tiny bit too low for me, so unbypass the clip gain, and you should hear those first hits kind of locking in with the bass a bit better.
But they're buying time for me with you, so I hang on. Well, I never dreamed that a car ride with you is something I'd give it all up just to do again. So we'll take the long way.
A little bit of reverb on the kick, tiny amount, just to slightly extends the low end. And then this little baby is just a little sub kick emulator, and I thought that the kick didn't have quite enough low end for me, so pulled this in, and is it drastic? I don't think it was that drastic, but I can't remember from my mix decision making, so we'll listen to it with and without again. Yeah, so it kind of just rounds the kick out. It's got a lot of slap and a lot of punch, but just not quite enough kind of low end oomph for me. Snare, quite straightforward. Bit of filtering, cutting, some boosting of the high end on an EQ that I prefer the sound of for high end boosting. It's just This Tokyo Dawn Labs is super smooth, really cool. Limiter, because again my problem was that these tracks were incredibly punchy and I wanted this mix to be a bit smoother. Snare bottom, nothing. Actually, should I play it with and without the processing? The two snares are sent to a snare bus, which has just again got another limiter on. So this is the snare before the processing and without the reverb that I've applied. So yeah, small moves. It's a bit fatter, tiny bit brighter. You get a bit more of the kind of dynamic ring-ville. There's some drum bus processing going on, but nothing fancy. A bit of saturation. Yes, toms really didn't need much. These sounded amazing and were super clean. Bit of clip gain. I think there's a bit of automation. Yeah, a tiny bit. So go through the toms. Again, these didn't really need much. Love that low tom. Super cool. So big. So I kind of approach toms in a similar way for everything. I kind of cut off as much as I can in the low end that's going to get in the way of the kick. And then I'll do a boost of its kind of fundamental note, which was about 78, 80 hertz. Kind of not exact, it's quite a wide cue. Get rid of some of the flabbiness, kind of. Let's listen to that frequency on its own. Oh, there's some tom reverb going on. -3. I can't remember where it was. That'll do. Yeah, a little bit of that gone. Some of the, I think these were quite slappy again. Lots of punch, lots of high end. Like everything was cutting through in the mix with no problem. So I found myself kind of pulling back on things that one might ordinarily be boosting. High shelf for a bit of slap because these were cleaned up so nicely and the drums were so simplistic and well played and just the right part. Didn't have to worry too much about cymbal bleed or anything like that, so real pleasure to work on. The overheads needed quite a lot of work because, as was the theme of this track, it was very dynamic, so I like to limit a lot on my overheads anyway because I don't generally go for the snare sound in an overhead. I like to kind of clamp that down quite a lot because I need to be able to control the hi-hats and the cymbals and whatever, and having a giant snare punching through can kind of throw the mix and the balance out of whack. Right, so basically lots of high frequency management. This is a dynamic EQ, again Tokyo Dawn, very cool plugin. Lots of limiting, because yeah, as I've said a few times, the main problem was too dynamic. Right, so limiter, let's play the overheads. So you can hear the snare becomes a lot bigger without the limiting on, and the cymbals and the hi-hats become a lot lower in the mix. And because we've got such punchy, like direct mics, I wanted to try and build a flatter set of overheads so that I could get my punch coming from the direct mics instead. kind of basic EQ for a set of overheads. Harshness 3K, get rid of that. Room sound at 500ish, get rid of that. High pass as aggressively or not aggressively as you'd like, and then I like to boost a little. I don't know why I decided to boost this. I imagine there was a bit of fatness in the snare that I wanted to pull out. So the Nova was doing, the two Novas in fact, as well as two limiters, were dynamically pulling down the cymbals. Okay, actually, so that bit is probably the biggest example. It was loud and quite bright. So I'll play that section with the two dynamic EQs off. Okay, and then with it on. Just a bit more consistent and nowhere near as kind of aggressively harsh. Lots of kind of 4, 5, 6K stuff going on there that wasn't for me. I think I even tried de-essing it. Clearly didn't make it in the final mix, but... Hello, Matt from the future, present, not the past. But anyway, I'm editing this video, and I just wanted to say that in hindsight, watching this back, I probably could have built my drum mix from the overheads, but instead, because I'm a metalhead and I usually use overheads as cymbal mics mostly, I'm used to limiting and cutting so that you're left with cymbals, and then the majority of the punch comes from the direct mics. But instead, you could totally have made a case for having the overhead sound as the core of the mix and filling in space or punch with the spot mics, but I didn't do that, and when I recorded this, it sounds like this is the only way to do drum mixing with overheads. It's not. So what's next? Shaker, tambourine, cymbals. I mean, that was a little bit set and forget. Make sure I was happy with it. The heartbeat I was happy with, and then decided that I wanted it to be a bit more heard in the mix rather than felt, because it's very kind of sub-low information. So the bass, this sounded unbelievable. I did next to nothing. Limited it, EQ'd it. Yeah, this was so well recorded, I didn't need to do much to this at all. Again, I think the main issues I was coming up against with this mix was that there's not enough low end in the things that needed low end, but the mid-range and the top end, well, not top end necessarily in bass, but the mid-range was really well dialed in, but the low end was just a bit kind of, I guess, conservatively handled, so I decided to whack a bit more in. Limiter on bass, I mean, it's just what you do, isn't it? You want a consistent low end. So I limit the bass, I'll show you how much. I know between 6 and 10 depending on how heavily this was played. I like to use a slightly slower release on the L1 because otherwise you can get a bit of unwanted kind of brightness if it's kind of, I don't know what you'd refer to it as, I guess, kind of when it's too aggressively kind of releasing. I can show you actually. Right, so 16.6, I won't forget the setting this time, so let's pull it all the way down. I think that sounds a bit brighter and a bit more attacky, which is fine. Maybe it's not that different, but generally I like slower releases, and it wasn't too much of an issue with this one. EQ, just big low end boost really, 6 dB across the kind of, I guess, 2 octaves of the fundamental note. I'll turn that off and on. fairly straightforward stuff. I just wanted it to be beefier. The guitars were the most interesting part of this because they were quite interestingly arranged. Well arranged, but interesting, because there's kind of, as the song moves on, different parts of the guitar are considered the lead guitar, I guess. Or not the lead guitar is the solo. Is there a solo in this? There is a solo. Yeah, it's not the lead guitar, but anyway, I'm gibbering. So basically, initially had my 2 acoustic guitars panned hard left and right, which you can hear like this. Oops, we got some delay happening. Yes, because I had to print some delays. We'll get to that in a hot sec. Right, so yeah, I had those at 50-50, at 100% left and right, these 2 acoustic guitars. But at the intro, that was a bit too wide for my tastes. Because the guitars aren't playing the same thing. They're kind of more interestingly arranged, some octave stuff happening, some slightly different chord interpretations going on. So I can show you the automation lane. Basically, during the first verse, whilst the acoustics aren't as kind of heavily involved, I narrowed the pan a bit, because having one guitar really far over to the left when the lead's in the centre and there's nothing really filling the space on the right, it just felt really, really wonky. So yeah, just narrowed it up, a little bit of automation, nothing too interesting, but I'll play it anyway. And then if I make that wide, you may be able to more easily hear why that sounds a bit weird to just have the one acoustic guitar really far over to the left. I don't know about you, but the right hand side feels really empty when it's like that. So just having it a little bit over kind of alleviates that a touch. And then yeah, just a point where the electric rhythm comes in is when I kind of throw these out wide. I've done quite a lot on the guitar, this rhythm, so. Filters, I feel like electric guitars love filters. It just kind of really focuses the sound and brings it a bit more forward. I cut these frequencies because this is where this was interfering with the vocal, and this was interfering with the collective low end of the song, so pulled that back a bit. Compression, not always necessary with electric guitars, but for this sort of quite punchy sound, not punchy, I guess, percussive. It gets percussive in sections, so a bit of compression. Initially, to bring that out by the looks of it, slow attack, slow release. Well, for an 1176, this setting generally makes stuff a bit punchier. Let's see how much gain reduction we're doing. Only a little bit, very light compression there. Limiting, I think, for some of the more punchy sections, if I recall correctly. In fact, you know what? That actually makes the most difference in the mix, because realistically, when you're playing it on its own, why does that matter? Why does a slightly more punchy, percussive sound coming through? It was because it was interfering with everything else that was going on in the mix.
The moment is here and the chances look good, and the pain of recovery is well.
Particularly with the kick and the bass, that bum bum. I felt the guitar was poking through a little bit too much without the limiter on, so I take both the bits of compression off.
The moment is here and the chances look good, and the pain of recovery is well.
Yeah, just a bit inconsistent for me. So that's that. EQ, again just boosting the highs. Again, this kind of range that guitars and vocals operate in, I like to make room for the vocals there, so dynamically dipping is quite useful for that. Sometimes it's just flat EQ can work, but yeah, dynamic was my go-to for this one. I also, for this, because I found this guitar arrangement a tiny bit lopsided, as I mentioned before, I made an opposite. So basically just a filtered reverb going off to one side, because I've panned this over to the left a little bit, panned the reverb over to the right, so I'll play those on their own. Just make sure there's no verbs happening. You can hear it a lot in the stabs. It basically creates a whole sense of space, and then when you mute the guitar opposite track, as I've named it, it kind of, the image just really shifts over kind of to the 50 mark, and you can really hear like, oh, the guitar's placed there. This kind of turns it into a kind of pseudo stereo recording. The guitar opposite probably isn't necessary for the whole section, but it's useful here. Yeah, I mean, the stuff was recorded super well, so it's just a bit of filtering, a bit of limiting, and then a bit of a high boost, because this music sounded great, nice and bright. The pedal steel was very interesting to deal with. So it's very dynamic, and I think there are two ways of going about this. I opted for compression, but I feel like maybe a more traditional mixer would really ride it, really almost treat it like a vocal, because it is melodic in sound. I'm going to check that I'm still recording. Yep, still recording, great. And yeah, so I opted for the compression route, H-comp, because I have it now. It was free at some point. Let's just have a listen to it. So very dry, very bright in that kind of 2-3K region that I've mentioned before. So without seeing it, I can almost certainly tell you that I've done some cutting in that region. Oh dear, maybe not then. Compression, EQ. There we go. Okay, so yeah, I have. So that was without. This is all with the processing. Again, brightness. Nice airy shelf. So yeah, really taming it, making it a bit less thick sounding, and then I rendered down. I don't have H delay at this studio. Bit of a reverb on it. Yeah, adds a nice kind of width and depth to it, because it's slap bang in the middle. So I've got a wide delay and reverb, just to add a sense of space and occasion to the sound. Yeah, I definitely found this one harder to mix in. So there's a tiny bit of automation, particularly during this section, because it's sparse-ish because it's a verse, but there's actually quite a lot going on. Piano. Oh yeah, all these little extra bits. So I imagine all I did here was filter. Nope, just a super high boost, the cut at the sort of vocal range on the piano, and then some filtering, low and mid-range stuff. This didn't feel especially important. It had a few moments that kind of poked through in the mix, which was nice, but yeah, this not very loud in the mix, and generally speaking, except for a bright shelf, it's just been cut and compressed, and let's have a listen to it without. And then with. Yeah, I mean, you can hear it's a bit more placed after the processing happens, if that makes sense. Like, it's brighter and it kind of, you can hear where it's going to sit. The organ, again, it's a nice part, and it comes in particularly just before the second pre-chorus by the looks of it.
Well, I never dreamed that a car ride with you is something
Yeah, I mean, these feel like arrangement editions, and so they're in there and they're felt, and I've done a bit of boosting and cutting in automation terms whenever they're not needed so much. But yeah, not quite set and forget, but definitely not too fussed about them. The organ, I just grittied it up a bit. I think it was quite clean sounding. I mean, it's totally spot on in terms of the production choice, but just felt a little bit clean to me. Let's turn the automation off and then make this a bit louder. It's a bit quiet at the moment. Yeah, didn't do a huge deal to this. Again, it just sounded right. Pulled it up, balanced it, distorted it a little bit. Used the IVGI2, which I love. It's a great saturation plugin. And then there's an accent here, which, yeah, I just pulled up, applied a bit of reverb to give it a bit of space. I didn't have it too loud, because too loud and it felt a little bit off in the mix, which I can show you. Actually, I've not done anything else to this track.
At your strength, maybe I'd see the lining. It takes all I have.
Very, very subtle. But if I pull it up too much, I pull it up another 3 dB-ish.
All I have. I'd see the lining. It takes all I have.
Just feels a tiny bit too obvious and in your face, which wasn't for me. So that's all we did there. The vocals had a lot of work. As you can hopefully see, lots of automation, lots of plugins, bit of parallel processing. Let's get these all into Vision. Control Windows up. Except only when you've got link, track and edit selection, because otherwise you just make one random track bigger, which obviously no one wants. So let's try that again. Okay, so that should be all of the tracks I need. Control Windows up, and then that's all of the tracks into view. Right, okay, so let's turn all of the processing off. In fact, maybe not on the reverbs and the delays. Let's just mute those instead. Turn that off. Vocal air, we'll just mute instead. Harmonies, backing vocals. I mean, that's a lot of plugins. Okay. Alright, so let's play, I guess, a bit with all the vocal arrangement stuff going on.
Something I'd give it all up just to do again. So we'll take the long way home, and baby, we'll take it slow.
So yeah, sounds great on its own. Again, kind of theme of this production was that I found it all too dynamic. Clearly, or maybe not clearly, but it looks like it wasn't recorded with a compressor on, which is fine. So I guess I'll go through maybe I'll play the finished product of the vocals as well. That might be beneficial. So from what we just heard to this.
Well, I never dreamed that a car ride with you is something I'd give it all up just to do again. So we'll take the long way home, and baby, we'll take it slow, even if all I'm buying is 5 more.
So hopefully what you get there is a bit of depth on the backing vocals. They are kind of behind the lead vocal. The lead vocal is super forward, and that is to do with this kind of multi-staged compression thing, which I will go through now. There we go. Right, great. So because these were so dynamic, kind of multi-staged compression felt the best. Otherwise I'd have to sit there and clip gain the whole thing, which I could have done. That's a totally valid way of doing it as well. But I just wanted the vocal a lot more consistent. Like this, without all this compression, is going to be way louder than this, and so it makes balancing very difficult. And obviously you still automate this stuff anyway, but as a base kind of starting point, yeah, lots of compression. So I'll go to one of the louder sections here. I'm going to show you how much compression we're doing. So this is the first compressor in the chain, and this is basically, the goal of this is to pull down the peaks, not drastically, but 3, maybe a bit more dB. I hope, anyway. I think that was what I was intending for. So this is one of the louder sections.
We'll take the long way home. I can't stand to let you go.
So yeah, you can see it's not really doing much in this middle section, but then when things are up here and here, it's going up to like 5. I hope this meter is correct anyway. -5, -3, -5 is where we're living. So yeah, that's all that's doing. It's not going to be doing much at all for like this section.
So we'll take the long way home.
Yeah, which is fine. It's fine. First point is to pull these big parts down. Second compressor is doing, well, hopefully, if I've got this right, it should be doing a bit more of a general compression, and then it will still be compressing a lot for these bigger sections, but it won't be like flatlining when these big sections come in. So let's play a kind of smaller section into the bigger section.
Even if all I'm buying is 5 more minutes with you, we'll take the long way home. I can't stand to let.
Super. Right, so yeah, never really went more than 3 dB, so we're kind of getting 8-10 dB of compression across these first 2 compressors, and that's kind of our starting point. That's our consistent vocal. That's kind of maybe not the amount of compression you'd want during the recording, but you know, something close to that. Like if I were to spend the time to render these would look, in fact I might do that as a little experiment. Let's commit up to this insert and see what happens. Let's go for do nothing and see what the waveform looks like with that compression on. Yeah, so I mean immediately you can see a lot more consistent, a lot more consistent than what we had. It's not bringing up much, it's not bringing up the lower stuff, but it is bringing down these giant peaks, and in a smooth way, which I'm actually quite happy with. So yeah, that's what our compression settings are doing to get us to our starting point. There'll be more compression, as you can see. It's mostly compression. Filters, just in case. I mean, this sounds incredibly well recorded in an expensive low noise studio, so this is kind of just out of habit more than anything else. Don't want any kind of extra unnecessary rumble or extra top end stuff. Alright, so here we got some flavor compression, parallel compression by the looks of it, and I used a preset, which is fine. Let's have a listen to what this does. Let's use this section we've been playing through before.
Even if all I'm buying is 5 more minutes with you, we'll take the long way home. I can't stand to let it.
Okay, so what this is doing is this is kind of that traditional compression of bringing up the lower stuff, taking down, well, no, it's not taking down much of the higher stuff, but this is kind of really squashing it, really bringing the vocal out front. Yeah, not a great deal more to say about that one. That is just kind of what you'd expect your vocal compression to achieve. If I play that in context with the mix, that should, hopefully, you'll hear the vocal come forward or backwards. Well, not forward or backwards. You'll hear it come forward when it's in, and then it'll go back when it's not.
Even if all I'm buying is 5 more minutes with you, we'll take the long way home.
Yeah, a lot of the kind of lower, deeper stuff comes forward, like the vocal kind of, I mean, it's very subtle, but it kind of pops out the mix a little bit. Limiting, I imagine I still wasn't happy with all the peaks. Let's see where we're limiting. We're also getting a bit of level from this as well.
With you, we'll take the long way home. I can't stand to let you go.
It looks like it is also kind of doing a bit of broadband de-essing, which is interesting. I did find that the sibilance was coming through quite heavily on this, so... Oops. Right, you. Go back to normal, please, thank you. Bit of de-essing. I don't know how heavily this is going to be de-essing, but I can't imagine it being too heavy. Let's have a look.
5 more minutes with you, we'll take the long way home.
Cool, yeah, so up to 6 dB on an S, which is, and it's only the high frequency, so that doesn't sound like a really big dip of a compression. Let's go to the vocal all Vox bus, as I've named it. Let's go back to looking at all of the arrangement there. Because we've got all these doubles, harmonies, triples, what I'm doing is I'm getting a lot of the heavy lifting EQ. Sorry, let's pull this one up in there as well. Right, because there's all these layers, I've gone for kind of, it's not quite top down. I don't tend to think of it in top down terms. But yeah, I just did a lot of the kind of mud clearing and some of the tone shaping, I guess, stuff in one EQ on a group, which I'll turn off and on again.
And baby, we'll take it slow, even if all I'm buying is 5 more minutes with you.
Kind of that EQ just kind of places it in the mix a little bit. What have we got here? Again, high shelf. Just adds a bit of tone, bit of brightness, bit of energy, saturation. Compressing and EQing in one movement, bring everything to mix. So I'm reading this frequency on, so if I different saturation frequencies on this, you can get different effects. Depending on what you use from drums, then I'm going to saturate more stuff. Below the rest of the vocals, more time stuff that you want to saturate. I could talk about this plugin for days. It's, despite it only having 6 knobs, it is very, very useful and good. Right, now one of my favourite parts of this was the use of, not delay, a vocal air bus. So this is a trick I stole from Pensado's place. Someone stole, he gives them out because he's a nice man. But what this is basically very heavily saturated, or not heavily, I've got the relaxed button on, but more saturated than I would ever put on a main vocal take. All of the high shelf, and very heavily limited, which is again is kind of doubling up as a bit of a de-esser as well. And then what I'm doing is mixing that in. So the vocals are soloed, and what is going to that? Is it just the lead vocal? Yeah, just the lead vocal is going to that. And what I found this did was it really helped me get the vocal to sit evenly on top of the mix, whereas automating it up and extra level wasn't quite doing that. So I'll take the vocal air off, in solo, and then we'll bring it back in, and you should be able to hear quite a significant difference.
It's 5 more minutes with you. We'll take the long way home. I can't stand.
Right, let's try that again. So here's the chorus with it off.
We'll take the long way home. I can't stand to let you go. If these miles together lead to the...
Great, and then here's it with it on.
We'll take the long way home. I can't stand to let you go. If these miles together lead to the end of our road.
Yeah, in amongst all those vocals, I feel like the vocal air thing, obviously it's adding a bit of level because it's parallel processing, but I don't know, feels like it sits on top, and then it's even more pronounced in the mix, I think, if I remember rightly.
We'll take the long way home. I can't stand to let you go. If these miles together lead to the end of our road, I'm taking the long way home.
Again, it's another thing that just helps this vocal sit right on top of the mix, because it feels like the star. It's good, great lyrics, and good melody, good tone, and the vocal air kind of helps bring all of that forward. Delay and reverb, did I do anything interesting? Mod delay, the kind of standard setting. Reverb, room 2. I like deverb. Not much more to it for a delay. Abbey Road reverb trick, I guess, kind of filtering and EQing before it goes into a plate sound. Not doing anything special here. I don't often use plates, but I mean, is the verb even particularly pronounced on this? This is the vocal air. The lead is just going to the delay. All the vocals are going to the reverb.
We'll take the long way home. I can't stand to let you go. If these miles together lead to the end of our road,
Yeah, I mean, it's not doing a great deal. If a tiny bit of space, you hear it more basically when the vocals stop, so it's not too dry and up in your face, I guess. Is there anything else interesting in the vocals? The R's, again, not too special. Basically, the trick with these, for me, was to just have them loud enough, but further back in the mix. So, compression, again, 2 phases compression. Probably didn't need 2 phases of compression with this. It's really subtle, but it just makes the whole thing sit further back without losing much in actual volume. It's kind of perceived volume, I guess. High shelf, because we want brightness and air, but we don't want all that harshness in the kind of 4 or 5K region that's kind of screaming and whistling at you. Similar stuff that you get in a guitar amp with a heavily distorted guitar. So then there's some reverb and some compression to try and kind of glue it all together. Right, so turn all this off. Again, aim of the game is to push it back in the mix without it losing any kind of real volume. That's everything individually. Let's have a look at what we did on the mix bus. Oh, actually, whilst I'm here, what am I talking about? I've been here the whole time. What is this called? The rear bus, the parallel mix bus. I found it useful for this mix. I feel like that sort of parallel compression generally works quite well for this sort of music. I find stylistically it seems to make sense. I don't know why. So this is my routing. Everything is going to the submix with no processing on, and then everything is going to a parallel mix bus which has some compression on it. It just helps to bring the kind of mid-range forward, I guess, is the goal. Yeah, not doing huge amounts of compression, but basically when a solo comes forward or a vocal comes forward, it kind of helps place it in the front. It's mixed in fairly low, but I'll take it in and out to show you what this does. Very subtle. A little bit of a light mid-range boost is what I hear when I do this. I did have some mix bus processing going on, or sub-master processing, I guess you'd call it. And this is a setting that I copied from the Recording Revolution, and I use it, and sometimes it's awesome, and sometimes it squishes the mix a bit too much. I have it as a setting, as a preset. Right, so I'll play it and I will have to adjust the thresholds. Great, okay, and then, so what this is doing is just, again, focusing the mid-range. And so I'll take this in and out. Yeah, I liked it on this mix. I liked it a lot. And then that's feeding into a compressor, mix bus compressor. Which apparently I used some vocal bus preset for, which is not normal, but yeah, I'm happy with how it's sounding. I guess I'll take that in and out. That would make sense. Let's go to a vocal section actually.
Again, so we'll take the long way home, and baby, we'll take it slow.
Super. So without.
Again, so we'll take the long way home, and baby, we'll take.
It's not a good comparison because this is making it louder, which I didn't realise, which is fine. You can make things louder, it's just not as easy for direct comparison. And then yeah, I did this with the Avid Pro limiter, but I don't have that in the studio. Same with the C4. I was doing the same thing with the Pro MB that I showed you with the Pro MB on the C4. But yeah, because I don't have those plugins, I'm just changing them over to a different plugin to achieve a similar effect. So yeah. That's everything in the mix, which was a lot. I'll probably cut this down so that it's not as long as it has been. It's been probably, 20-30 minutes of me just gibbering about all of the little things I did in a mix, which maybe isn't even that good. Who knows? You tell me. Link in the description for the Recording Revolution trick on the mix bus, which is really cool, that I think he stole from someone else. And then there was another trick that I mentioned, the vocal air trick. I will try and find that into the layer, and I will link that as well. Links to my mix and links to the competition will also be there. So yeah, peace out.